on the Aboriginal rights and Indigenous. Now, I have only heard three people, and you're one of the three. Bruce Barty is the other, and myself, who've actually taken a stand that if we are going to build a new Alberta, that we need to have one rule of law that applies to everybody equally, which means we have to rethink even things like treaties and Aboriginal rights. And so you had talked about land acknowledgements, do nothing. I totally agree. I squirm in my chair every time I have to sit through a land acknowledgement. I don't think that this land is any more mine than it is theirs. I'm not racist. And just for, note, I have a brother who's full Innu. I'm Métis myself. And I just want the government to leave me alone. I want to be treated just like everybody else under the law. Let me, with my own skill sets, my own talents, my own natural abilities, run with my talents, and I'll do my thing. And I think land treaties have hurt the Aboriginal community. And now we have this huge Aboriginal industry. And it scares me because now you have even people like the Alberta Prosperity Project that are talking about keeping this exact same system and giving them more money, which I think there is vested interest in that. And then you talked about unceded territory. So, John, that video, a lot of people may not be familiar with it. Can you take us down the path of this land treaties, unceded territory, explain it so that people can understand where the problems lie and why to keep the system exactly as it is today is the wrong direction for a new Alberta?
Okay, we'll start off by paying tribute to Catherine Kronos, who was a mom in Ontario who courageously and heroically spoke out at a meeting of her school parent council. She was elected to that school parent council, and she said politely that land acknowledgements were political and divisive and inappropriate. And for that, the school board intervened and kicked her off of parent council. The Justice Centre provided lawyers to write a demand letter to the school board explaining why they were completely out of line. What they did was illegal in just arbitrarily just kicking her off the parent council. Just last week, we got word the school board has backed down and reversed its position. And so Catherine Kronos is back on the parent council. But that took a lot of courage. She said she disagrees with the land acknowledgements being imposed on everybody at a public meeting. And so in my short video, I point out that they are hypocritical virtue signaling by people who would never give away their own house or their own land for free to an Aboriginal. They're not prepared to do that. They might sell it to an Aboriginal, but they're not going to say, oh, well, it's I'm on stolen land, so I'm going to give my house and lands for free to an Aboriginal. They're not doing that. So they're hypocrites. They're not helping people on reserves. And significantly, these land acknowledgements, they spread this false notion that the treaties somehow were intended to create a permanent racial apartheid system where people have, forever and ever have different rights based on their ancestry, which was not the point of the treaties. The treaties recognize the reality that the British and the French, by the time Canada was created, it was the British were in control of this territory. We had an open borders policy and a massive immigration, and so we had the Brits and the Irish and the Scots and the French and the Germans and the Chinese and the Japanese and the East Indians and Africans and South Americans, and we've had all these immigrants come in to swell our population up to 40 million people. But the treaties recognize the fact that the British were in charge of the land that is today Canada. The British were in control. The British had imposed their laws, their court system, their police, their armies, their language, their culture, their religion, their education. And so there was, a takeover of this land by the British. And the treaties simply recognized that fact that the Aboriginals would, like everybody else, would submit to the authority of the Crown, at that time Queen Victoria, and that we would be equal citizens under the law. And the only real carve out to that was that the Aboriginals in those days, because they were still reliant on hunting and fishing, and not yet part of the mainstream economy, you had some land that was allocated specifically for the Aboriginals. But those treaties did not intend a permanent racist apartheid system where you have different laws applying to different people based on their ancestry. That was never the intention of the treaties. And so the land acknowledgements are a problem because they promote this notion that unless you're Aboriginal, you're not actually entitled to be in Canada. You're not entitled to live here. You really should feel ashamed. You should feel guilty. You should consider going back to where you came from. And that's not a recipe for unity or for a prosperous society where citizens live together in harmony.
That is not what most people believe. That is not what most people understand these treaties to be. And you're seeing it now. I mean, when I grew up, you didn't see it. But today, it is this belief that somehow we are sitting on Aboriginal land. That's what most people, in my opinion, when you go door to door, that's what they believe, that these land acknowledgements have convinced them that, and you have these chiefs that are, stating this is our land. And, what you just said is not, what the majority of Albertans, let alone Canadians, actually believe to be true.
Well, these land acknowledgements do have an effect of indoctrinating people, and once again, we have to speak truth to power, and we have to just educate ourselves and educate other people on the nature of these treaties, which were acknowledgements of the treaties acknowledged the reality of the British takeover of the land that is today Canada, and that this country would continue to welcome people, so that East Indians and Chinese people and Africans and Ukrainians and Germans are not second-class Canadians just because they cannot trace their Canadian-born ancestry back for many, many centuries. We shouldn't have second-class citizens based on how long your ethnic group has lived on this territory. That is racist. So we have to speak out against the racism that these land acknowledgements are promoting.
John, I wish there was more of you. I really do. I wish there were many, many more of you. So then what do we do? How do we deal with these treaties? Because even our own government is saying that we're going to honor treaties.